The night is dark and full of terrors, and Starks are always right eventually. Winter is coming. Well, actually, at this point, it is here. Greetings, adventurers. My name is Kramer, and at this moment, outside of the safety of these walls, there's a snowstorm gusting through the fields and the trees and the rivers outside. And even when it is not snowing, it is still very, very cold. As the cold weather has gotten colder and colder over the last couple of weeks, I have found it increasingly difficult to film anything outside, let alone stay outside for any lengthy period of time. So let's just say the winter has the tendency to put a bit of a damper on the adventuring mood. So today I would like to answer the question that I think probably a lot of people have given these colder months, which is, what would an adventurer do in the winter? What should we be doing? Taking inspiration from both history and fantasy and taking advantage of the fact that we do live in the modern age and many of us don't have to worry about freezing to death or starving to death in the winter months, let's come up with a plan so that we can stay immersive and stay motivated to get ourselves ready for our adventures come the spring. And I do mean immersive in the fun sense, not in the let's sit in a dark room made out of mud and potentially freeze and starve to death sort of way. And please remember, for the context of this video, that I am referring to what we as human beings on this earth are capable of physically achieving, because it doesn't matter if my character is immune to frost. I am not immune to frost, so it's not really that effective when it comes to reenactment. And if you are working in a story that you're writing or a tabletop role-playing game, then adjustments to what I'm going to suggest here can be made based on fantasy races that don't have a problem with the cold. Winter has always been a time to slow down, take stock, and prepare for the coming of the spring. And in the medieval period, they honestly didn't have a whole lot to entertain themselves with, and by and large, people would have been staying close to home and indoors as much as possible. Now, there are of course still chores that a number of people would still be doing: gathering firewood, mending things around the farm or property, making various things, slaughtering animals for food, cooking food, eating the food, all just in order to stay alive. Nights would have been dark with only fires, maybe candles, but more probably rushlights for illumination. So short days, long nights, and unrelenting cold. Could an adventurer continue to go on adventures given these conditions? Could I do that? Should you do that? Well, I've tried, and my experience I would describe as novel, but not necessarily pleasant. And a number of people have pointed out that probably winter is not the perfect time to be going on adventures. So suffice it to say that you could try, but it would be very difficult, especially if you were going on a longer journey. But even a couple of days like that could potentially be very dangerous. So allow me to paint a picture in your mind real quickly, and you can decide if it sounds reasonable or insane. You are an adventurer. You and your party of champions travel all over the country nomadically in search for quests and treasure. You live your life on the open road. Ah, freedom. And every year as winter begins to set in, you dig to the bottom of your very large pack to take out all of your winter equipment. That's heavy-duty shelters, bedrolls, winter clothing, and attachments for your boots that will help give them more insulation and better traction. And you have to carry that all of the time because you're a nomad. So where else are you gonna put it? A cart? Good luck in the winter. You could use your survival skills to build some sort of shelter while you're on your travels so that you can cut down on a little bit of that carry weight. But that is assuming that you have the skills to do that in the first place, and at that point you're also not really adventuring. You are camping in the same spot indefinitely, and at that point you might as well just go to an inn or a tavern and try to stay there, because then at least you'll be warm. But you are an adventurer, so you soldier through, whether it's smart to do that or not. So here you are, loaded up, carrying your very heavy burdens from town to town, and you become very sweaty with all of the exertion. And that last fight with the wolves to get their pelts for the tanners certainly didn't help either. So now you actually have to stop mid-journey in order to change your clothes because you've begun to become damp. And when you become damp, the threat of hypothermia increases exponentially. So you have to change into dry clothes. meaning you have to carry even more things. Now that you've changed further along your journey, actually traveling has started to become very difficult because the snow has begun to pile up in a lot of spots because there were no plows and there is no salt, there is just mud and difficult terrain as far as the eye can see. Even a horse, if you had one, which you probably don't, would find it very difficult to traverse this terrain as it is. So you decide to make yourself a pair of skis, which you do every winter. And this is of course because the other options are to either buy a new pair of skis every year or carry skis with you everywhere you go, even in the summer. Because again, you're a nomad, that's kind of the point, so where are you gonna put them? And after all of this hardship, you finally reach the next town, exhausted and ready for a little rest. You realize that it's actually only been 2 days, and you have a whole 90 days left of this to go. Now you could do that, like I originally thought I would try to do. Or you could do what every other mammal on the face of the planet does and just hunker down somewhere safe for the winter. All of this is to say that you shouldn't feel bad or depressed for not wanting to go outside when it's 0 degrees, and that it is far smarter and more logical that you would take the time to recuperate and rest and then prepare for the start of your journeys next spring. Is there historical precedent for this? Yes, absolutely. It is what everyone did and will continue to do during the winter months. It is just what makes sense. That's what those months are for. Adventurers should treat these months no differently. And if we look at famous stories historically of people traveling during the winter months, what we will find is that oftentimes they are completely unintentional. We can take a look at the Donner Party. They didn't mean to be up there in the mountains when they got trapped during winter. That was a mistake. Now, is there a precedent for this in a fantasy setting? Also, yes. Let's look at Game of Thrones with the Night's Watch. They do send rangers out on excursions. They live in a very cold climate, but they have a home base in the form of Castle Black, Eastwatch by the Sea, etc., that they always come back to in order to recuperate and refuel. And we know that their plan isn't to spend the entire winter just abroad on some journey, because when Alistair Thorne tells Jon Snow and Sam Tarly in the first season of Game of Thrones that he and his ranger crew got caught outside of the wall during the winter and had to stay out there and they resorted to cannibalism in order to survive, that is an indication that that didn't go according to plan. See the Donner Party. Another example would be the Witchers of the School of the Wolf from The Witcher, who all come and stay at Kaer Morhen during the winter. So if even Witchers, hardened, experienced monster hunters who seemingly feel zero emotions and have an infinite capacity to endure hardship, decide to spend the winter at home, I don't really think we need to feel that bad about it. Which actually does bring up a very interesting point about fantasy universes, which will explain how come these universes that have ubiquitous adventurers seemingly never run out of monsters. And that is because if all of the adventurers are taking the winter off, there is an entire season for all of the monsters to repopulate and begin starting trouble again in the spring. So we've established that an adventurer would want to hunker down for the winter. It's just what makes sense. So where would they do that? Well, at home, if you have one. And if not, because you are that orphan vagabond that lives out of your knapsack and sleeps on the side of the road, like many characters that I have played, then perhaps at an inn. Then we run into the problem of an adventurer having to pay for 3 to 4 months worth of lodging and food without making additional income because they aren't actually going on any adventures. And that sounds rough, but it also sounds very accurate, because what it means is that that adventurer is spending the entire year attempting to accrue enough resources that they can survive the winter so that they can go into the spring and do it all again. Which is exactly what everyone else is doing in the medieval period. It's just one long game to try to survive winter. Now, it's possible that a medieval fantasy society that had a larger adventuring populace would actually begin to see larger establishments popping up that were essentially hotels, capable of housing dozens, if not hundreds, of adventurers all at the same time, so that they could all have a place to stay during the winter. And in smaller settlements that couldn't afford to do something like that, then it's possible that the odd farmer here or there could house 1 or 2 odd adventurers during the winter. And then there's the option of having monasteries or churches provide some sort of sanctuary. But there is also the final solution, going back to Castle Black with the Night's Watch and the Witchers. This provides a perfect reason for you to join an adventurers guild. You pay yearly or monthly, and that guild then uses those resources in part to build housing all over the country for adventurers to access access and utilize at need. Or it's possible that being part of the guild can also pay for you to stay at various inns if the guild happens to have partnerships with those inns. And now some of those guild lodgings might essentially be outposts or cabins, just like hunting cabins would be. You just have them in the woods, you find them because you know where they are, and then you stay for the winter. But I can also imagine a great hall that is fully equipped with all of the resources that an adventurer would need to rest and recuperate during the winter months. Housing, craftsmen, training facilities, a library that has all sorts of maps for planning over the winter, or history books or spell scrolls for people to do various researches, hot springs, laundry, apothecary, everything all in one central hub. I believe they call that a castle. So what should we adventurers be doing during the winter based on all of this? Well, the first thing is to take inspiration from the picture that I just painted. A farmhouse, a guild hall, a tavern, a cabin, a castle. All of these are inspiration for you so that you can have some fun and have a bit of a guideline, maybe create a Pinterest board or something, so that you can have some fun creating a small space in your house that is immersive and suitably medieval, so that you can complete some, if not all, of the other activities that I have to suggest in the following list. Read a good book. Brush up on your favorite fantasy lore. There are so many good options to choose from, and what better time to get a start on that reading list that you haven't touched all year than right now. Personal recommendations from me are always going to be The Lord of the Rings and all of the related source material and The Ranger's Apprentice. That is a lot of material to get through, so it should keep you comfortable through all of the winter. Or you could pick up a book on survival or bushcraft or foraging or some other skill, even just a regular history book, but something that is going to sort of feed that appetite for adventure. Peruse all manner of forums and articles. Learn as much as you can about the medieval period, about kit, about garb, so that you are adequately prepared for your adventures in the spring. Try to plan some adventures to go on for the coming year. That can be an event like a LARP, a reenactment event, or a Renaissance fair. It can also just be planning a camping trip or a simple vacation, even if it's not medieval, or even just looking at some maps to try to find some hiking trails in your area that you just haven't explored yet. But try to plan something. Probably a good skill to learn too, if you don't actually know how to read a paper map, is to take some time and learn how to do that. Sit down and just write something. Enjoy the experience and the peace of doing that, especially if you are using a quill pen or a dip pen, and especially if you're writing by candlelight. You can write a journal for the character or persona that you play. You can start writing a short story by hand if you're so inclined, or 'tis the season, you could write some letters to your family and friends. You went off to magic school 3 years ago and I never hear from you. Enjoy some adventurer-themed food and drinks. And by adventurer-themed, I of course, since we are the adventurers, simply mean food and drinks. There are plenty of free resources here on the internet that you can utilize to find recipes for various things. I have a few on the channel, but I highly recommend Townsend's and Tasting History with Max Miller for the cooking recipes, and How to Drink for the fantasy-themed cocktails, if alcoholic beverages are something that you are interested in. You can also pick up any number of official or unofficial fantasy-themed cookbooks for a lot of your favorite fantasy worlds. Those also make a really good Christmas gift, just FYI. Enjoy the tranquility and solace of maintaining your gear. Clean your armor, polish it, buff it, wax it, whatever you need to do based on what it is that you have. Make sure all of your tools are sharpened and functioning properly and stuff doesn't need to be replaced. Because once the adventuring season starts, you're not really gonna wanna do that, because then you're gonna get left behind. So there's no time like the present to make sure that your gear is good to go. I personally find doing that quite meditative, and it's probably very good for me actually to take a step back, relax a little bit, and just sit with my gear and get to know it a little better, rather than just running from tree to tree like I normally do, feeling the pressure of needing to go on the next journey. Because I'll be honest, I have neglected a lot of my gear so far this year. Find a new skill to learn. Mine has been leathercraft, but you don't have to pick a craft. It can just be a skill you'd like to train. If you're interested in picking up leather crafting, I highly recommend that you check out the Weaver Leather Supply channel for all of their tutorials. It's very helpful for me. And all of the channels that I'm mentioning will be down in the description. But you can pick any number of medievally appropriate skills or crafts to choose. There are, of course, sewing and knitting, woodworking, blacksmithing, leatherworking, stuff like that, but you could also make it as simple as you wanted it to be. You could just take the time, learn calligraphy, learn how to use a flint and steel, learn how to forage mushrooms. But you also want to make sure that you are reinforcing what you've learned with something that you can practice, so that you don't just have the theory of what it is, you actually are physically doing it. And if you have a craft that you've been doing for a while, you're good at it, and you're not really interested in picking up something else, then try making a project that you've never made before, something that you feel like you're not ready for, because that is a learning experience all unto itself. Just throwing yourself in at the deep end and seeing what you can do. You might surprise yourself. I did. I never thought I could make a glove, and I made a glove. Very proud. And this is the one that I am most excited for. This is essentially my challenge to you. Use this time in the winter, yes, to relax, yes, to enjoy spending time with family. It's the holidays, it's cozy, but also use it as a time to prepare yourself and better yourself for next year. And by that, I mean train now. Just like the adventurers at the guild. 3 to 4 solid months of no life or death experiences, no dragons to kill, but a solid amount of time to level up your strength and dexterity. No adventurer is going to pass that up. So this year, don't let your New Year's resolution be, I'm going to be in better shape starting next year. It's a really passive way of wording that. Instead say, I am going to be in better shape by spring. And again, there are tons of free resources you can use for that, even if it's just doing a couple push-ups every day, but just make the commitment to do something. It's really exciting that adventuring can be the tool that we use to make ourselves better in real life. I really like that a lot. There are even some fantasy-themed workout programs that are floating around out there on the internet. And yes, now is a great time to have some modern indoor adventures, given that it's harder to go outside. And of course, I am talking about video games. We're still nerds, right? I've been playing God of War from 2018 because I never played it when it first came out, because I heard really good things about Ragnarok. I wanted to know the full story, and I'm loving it so far. Great game. But from now on, don't play games like that passively or just to be sort of mindless and entertained. Really come at it with an active perspective of trying to learn something about adventuring from the game that you're playing. How does your character wear his equipment? What equipment does he or she have? What problems are you getting into and how are you solving them? Because all of that is very informative. You see, Mom, I'm not wasting time playing video games. I'm doing invaluable research. And of course, you can watch one of these great videos to keep you in the adventuring mood. So stay safe, stay sharp, stay warm, and good luck on your adventures.